the recent class of Hall of Fame inductees were selected to be Hall of Famers, and I'm going to mention the NBA players, so sorry, Jay Wright and the coach and the WNBA players, my apologies. But this is a show about ranking these guys and who is the best one that we thought was inducted. Chris Bosh, Chris Webber, Paul Pierce, Ben Wallace, and Tony Kukoc were all the recent inductees.
We can all agree Kukoc is last, right?
Yeah.
Kukoc is last.
Okay, so we don't even got to get.
So let's rank these from 1 to 5. Who's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth? I'll start with you, Riv.
Well, I've been a big advocate of Ben
Start
Wallace.
from 5. 5 down.
I've been a big advocate of Ben Wallace getting to the Hall of Fame for a couple of years now. I've just been very confused as to why he hasn't got in. Hopefully Chauncey get in soon. But I got Wallace at 5.
Other than Kukoc.
Yeah, I'm not even counting.
So
him.
4. He's at 4.
Oh, I thought that, okay. So
That's
I got
right.
Kukoc at 5, Ben Wallace at 4. I think he's one of the greatest defensive players.
God bless
you.
Thanks.
He's one of the greatest defensive players we've ever seen.
I called you mucus, man.
It'd be all right.
Sneezing.
But offensively, he virtually didn't have any. I mean, he was a great screen pick and roller, but that was pretty much it. So I got Ben Wallace at 4. Third, I got Chris Bosh. I think Chris Bosh was really good. He was one of those guys who walked into the league, could step out and shoot the jump shot. He was a solid offensive player. But at 2, Chris Webber, he was just, people really forget Chris Webber's career. He was really good with the Kings, even with the Golden State Warriors. He was a beast, a 20-10 guy consistently. He was on those teams with Sacramento where they was giving LA hell. So I got him at 2. But I got Paul Pierce at 1. People, I know he's a meme and people like to make fun of him because his takes absolutely suck. But before the takes, even before KG and Ray Allen, he was a beast. He was a bucket. Him and Antoine Walker used to get it in, give buckets for Boston. And even during those runs, he used to give LeBron fits in the playoffs. He used to give Kobe fits. He used to give Orlando fits. He was a clutch shooter. And he's a finals MVP. So I got to go with Pierce at 1.
You can give your list because.
So I think are all of us going to have 5-3 basically the same?
Yeah.
You have Bosh 3rd?
I do.
So me, I have Kukoc 5, Wallace 4, Bosh 3. Chris Webber's number 1 for me. Paul Pierce is 2.
It's close.
It is very
close.
Chris Webber is number 1 for me. And before I go on to it, Ben Wallace, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, 6-time All-Defensive Team, 5-time All-NBA, 4-time All-Star. A year he averaged 15 rebounds per game. And that was back when the NBA was much tougher, not like these Andre Drummond rebounds now. And Tony Kukoc, I think is arguably the worst player on this list.
Arguably?
Well, he is the worst player on this list. He made the Hall of Fame because of his international status. But when we're talking about his NBA career, 6th Man of the Year, All-Rookie Team.
Champ.
And that's all of his accolades. 3-time NBA champ. His best season came when he averaged 19 points per game after the Bulls won their 3rd championship.
When Jordan left.
Exactly. And the Bulls finished 13-37 that year. Kukoc was, I don't know why he made the Hall of Fame. You can't tell the story of the NBA without him because he played for the Bulls. But realistically, should he have made it? I don't think so. I'm kind of pushing back on that. But shout out to him, international player. He was great overseas in Croatia. Then we talk about Chris Bosh. And Chris Bosh is a guy he's had a weird career because his best season he averaged 24-11, but he didn't make the playoffs in Toronto. Then he was a part of the Big Three in Miami. That's what he's most known for. And the first year in the playoffs in Miami, he averaged 19-9. He looked like a great player, but then years after, he became much more of a defensive-oriented big man. He averaged 14 points per game in those playoff runs. 11-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA, 2-time NBA champ.
Is that really a Hall of Fame career?
He averaged 20 a good amount of his seasons.
11-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA.
11-time All-Star is Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah, and his career got cut short.
That's 11 years being an All-Star.
His second to last year, he averaged 21.
That's fair.
But this is about Chris Webber and Paul Pierce. Really, when we rank these players,
I agree.
It's about, do you think Chris Webber is better than Paul Pierce or vice versa? And I think Chris Webber's peak was better than Paul Pierce's.
Strong.
When we talk about their accolades, Paul Pierce has more All-Stars. He has 10 All-Stars to Chris Webber's 5. But Webber has more All-NBA teams, 5-4, and Paul Pierce has no All-NBA first team. And mind you, Chris Webber was playing in the West with Tim Duncan, with Kevin Garnett, with Dirk Nowitzki, and he was winning these all NBA first
So
teams.
you're just going to not say Paul Pierce is playing with LeBron. He's playing with T-Mac. Like, you just going to forget that part?
T-Mac was a guard.
T-Mac was a 3.
He was a guard.
T-Mac was a 3.
He was a
And he was
guard.
playing with Vince Carter, too. You forget that?
I was going to say Vince.
He wasn't good in Toronto, bro. What do you mean? You said he was playing with Vince Carter. When you play with Vince Carter, he averaged 8 points per game.
No. I'm talking about, like, in the East, bro.
Okay.
In the East.
Vince Carter was a 2, though.
Yo, come on,
Vince
bro.
Carter was a
Vince Carter
3.
Bro,
a
when
3.
you rank the top shooting guards from 2000, Vince Carter's on that list.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's
he was a
not. He's
3.
not a 3. Later on in his career, he
With New
became a
Jersey?
3. No, not in Jersey. In Orlando and Phoenix, he became a 3. But he was a 2 for the majority of his career.
Continue. Thought he was a 3.
Search up top shooting guards of the 2000s. You'll see Vince Carter on there.
I got you.
How quickly I forget, man. But Chris Webber, I think, had a better peak than Paul Pierce. You look at, I ranked their peaks, right? So Paul Pierce's peak was from 2000 to 2004. Chris Webber's was from 99 to 03. I'll talk about Chris Webber first. He averaged 25, 11, and 5 with 1.5 steals and blocks per game in those 4 seasons. Shot 48% from the field, 24% from 3. And in that 4-year stretch, he lost to the Lakers in the first round in 99 and 2000 season. The best player on his team was Jason Williams. Then the year after that, 2000-2001 season, lost to the Lakers again in the second round. His second best player was Peja Stojakovic, who's a good player. He didn't get Mike Bibby until his 3rd year in that 4-year stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did get Mike Bibby, they lost to the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, 7 games, 0-1-0-2 season. And that is infamously known as a point in time in the NBA history where that game was rigged. And if Sacramento had beat the Lakers, they would have won the NBA Finals, no doubt about it. And Chris Webber
Who
would
did play that year?
The Lakers.
The
Who did the
finals.
Lakers play that year?
It was
Indiana?
if it wasn't the Nets, it was Indiana.
It was 2 or 1?
0-1-0-2.
Nets.
So they would have definitely handled the Nets. And Chris Webber would have won a championship after beating a juggernaut Lakers team. And then that last year, they faced the Mavericks in 02-03 and lost in the second round. Paul Pierce's best 4-year stretch, he averaged 25, 7, and 4, 0.7 blocks per game, 43% from the field, 35% from 3. He missed the playoffs in 2000 to 2001, made the ECF in 01-02, and lost to the Nets, and Antoine Walker was the second best player, averaging 20 points per game. Lost in the second round in 2002-2003, and lost in the first round in 04-05. To be fair, Paul Pierce's teams were trash. Outside of Antoine Walker, when he started to dwindle down, his best players were Ricky Davis and Chucky Atkins. They were trash. Mm-hmm. But I just think when you talk about Chris Webber, the way that he transcended the power forward position, he not only was a guy who can give you 25 points per game a night, along with 12 rebounds, but he was somebody that was probably one of the better high post players in NBA history. And the way he can pass out of the post was next level. He was a point guard playing the power forward position. I think he's one of the first guys, outside of a few, of course, that I'm missing, like when we talk about the Grant Hills, who transcended to position playing point forward. Chris Webber was a part of that category of being a guy who can be your forward, who can be your big man, but can play the point guard. He was averaging 5 assists per game in his peak. And I tell you that, I told you that Chris Webber has 5 All-Stars to Paul Pierce's 10. Chris Webber missed, he didn't get inducted into the All-Star game like 6 times when he averaged 20 and 10. So realistically, Chris Webber should have been an All-Star multiple times because he was fantastic in Golden State. But Sacramento really changed his career. Now was the peak of his career. But in my opinion, I'm going with Chris Webber. I think, of course, Paul Pierce, because he played for the more storied franchise and he had a hell of a career. He's more of a big name. But I think Chris Webber at his peak, if I'm building a team, Pierce or Webber, I'm taking Chris Webber.
I want to double down. Pardon me. T-Mac and VC were actually 2 guards.
I know they were.
I apologize.
So
I look crazy.
My bad.
This is tough. It's kind of like pulling straws. They're pretty similar in the sense of both were really great defenders. Webber has the advantage of defensive rating by 1. Okay, thank you. But it's very close. Webber's 101 and Paul Pierce is 102. Obviously, Webber gets the edge rebounding-wise. He was the bigger guy size-wise. But then obviously Paul Pierce was the better shooter. At one point in time, Paul Pierce was the king of the three-point shot, all that. But he was really solid. The reason why I lean Paul Pierce is because he got his career going earlier in my opinion. Paul Pierce, it took him 3 years to average 25, basically 26 points per game. From year 2 to year 3, he took his points per game up 6 points. On top of all this, he was leading a terrible team to he would make the playoffs, but he was never really a real contender because his team was not that great. So obviously, maybe you could say that he averaged more points per game than Chris Webber did because he was asked to do more because his team was not good. But Chris Webber was still the best player on every team that he was on. He was still asked to score the basketball. So in that sense, I still give the edge to Paul Pierce because obviously he averaged a few more points, and I think he was more dynamic scorer than Chris Webber was. And in the year that Paul Pierce had won his championship, obviously they stacked the deck with KG, Ray Allen. That's an all-time great team. But he was still the Finals MVP. As great as KG was, as great as Ray Allen was, Paul Pierce left his impact on that series, and he was chosen to be the Finals MVP. So in terms of the two of them, it really is close. I can't disagree with your logic, truthfully. If you have Webber, I'm not going to say you're ultimately wrong. I just think I lean Pierce. One, he got the title. He's a bit more dynamic as a scorer. And when he was finally given a team to compete, he won.
Pierce went on one playoff stretch, right? I'm looking at his playoff stretches where he averaged 27, 9, 7, 2 steals, and a block.
And what year was this?
This was 02-03.
Yeah, man, he was different. And
10 games in. Another
thing about Paul Pierce, he was clutch. Say what you want about him. He would hit tough game-winning shots. He is one of the more clutch NBA players of all time. He has the signature quote, "Hey, you call bank, I call game." He was like that.
I mean, these two guys' careers just remind me of what do you value more, peak or longevity?
Agreed. But at the same time, his entire Boston career, he was like that. I think he averaged 20 every single season. I could look.
It's not 20. It's like 7.
His last 2 years, 4 years in Boston, he averaged a point or two under 20. Yeah. The last 2 years, he averaged 19.4 and basically 19. 18. Exactly. Paul Pierce's longevity in Boston was solid. Once he left Boston, he kind of fell off. This guy's career really didn't take off, and he didn't become Chris Webber until he joined the Kings.
He's averaging 24.
He was averaging 20 for sure, but then he averaged 27 in Sacramento. He became
he was averaging 24 and 8 in Washington.
He was solid, but coming out of Michigan, Chris Webber had the highest expectations we've seen of a ball player in a long time. Obviously, Michigan has the infamous Fab Five. He was the leader of that squad. But when he got drafted, he was supposed to be the best. He like top 5 off rip NBA players in the league. And he eventually got to superstar status, obviously, but he was a bit underwhelming to his expectations, is all I'm saying.
At 24 and
I don't think it was underwhelming to his expectations. He was just in bad situations,
but same could be said for Paul Pierce.
In 95, 96, averaging 24, 8, and 5 assists per game. You're right. Yeah. Well, you talk about longevity and peak. Chris Webber tore up his knee. But after he tore up his knee in his last full season in Sacramento, he still averaged 19, 21, 16, 20. Yeah. And then it was until
Paul Pierce was doing the same thing.
And then it was until he was 33 that he really fell off and he just became a role player. But Paul Pierce had the luxury of teaming up with 2 other superstar caliber players. I would say Ray Allen is more of an all-star, but he was touching that. He was the best shooter in the league at that point in time. And he got that luxury. Chris Webber never got that luxury to lean on 2 other players of that caliber.
I agree.
Sacramento was a bunch of good players. Mike Bibby was good.
Wait,
but
Peja Stojakovic wasn't on the same level as Ray Allen was when he was in Boston, when he was in Sacramento.
No.
That's crazy.
Peja's good.
No, they was on the same level.
Peja's
I'm talking about Ray in Boston.
Ray Allen was... when he first got traded to Boston?
Ray Allen in Boston.
Well,
first season in 2008, they were all world. The 3 of them.
Superstars, though?
All 3 of them were.
Ray Allen was not a superstar.
First year in
nobody
Boston,
is trading for Peja and saying we just created a big 3.
That's fair, but I wouldn't say he was a superstar.
But they also did give one of the best dynasties of all time a real run. And like you mentioned, if the game wasn't rigged, who knows what happens?
Yeah, but I'm saying that Sacramento had a bunch of good role players like Peja and Mike Bibby and Hito Turkoglu. They had a bunch of good role players, but they didn't have any real like all-star, even pushing all-star caliber, superstar caliber type of player.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about Paul Pierce and Chris Webber, really, I'm going to compare them to two current players today. It's really about, would you take Nikola Jokic or a Jason Tatum? Would you rather take a Jason Tatum who could score 26, 27 a game, or would you rather take a Nikola Jokic who can run point guard from the high post, from the top of the key?
That's a little difficult for me because both these guys were excellent defenders.
And the new era of the NBA would gear towards Tatum.
Yes, I agree.
You think?
A dominant wing, yeah.
With that type of
Chris,
size.
I say Nikola Jokic off of
No,
basis of
I
play
get
style,
what you're saying.
but Chris Webber, he has similarities to Jokic in terms of how he passes off the high post. But Chris Webber was a wing. I mean, 6'8", 6'9", he can slash to the basket, but he was also a phenomenal passer.
For sure.
So and plus he plays great elite defense.
For sure.
So Chris Webber would have been a step above, need I say, above like a Jokic in terms of just the things he can do. He can do more and impact the game in more ways. Yep. So it's really about, if you want an excellent scorer, well, Pierce was a good defender, but an excellent scorer and defender, or do you want an excellent scorer, rebounder, passer, and defender?